Hey, I'm Francis, and today we're going to make some music in BandLab, which is a free browser-based music production software that a few people have brought to my attention as a great beginner tool to make music. Let's check it out. So for those of us coming from another DAW, this is going to be a relatively familiar looking workstation where we have a timeline from left to right and a way to add tracks from top to bottom. This interface reminds me a little bit of GarageBand. We're going to keep everything pretty beginner friendly today. So if this is your first time making music without just dragging and dropping loops, this hopefully will stay at your level. What we're going to do is start by adding a track. I've added 2 already, and I'll probably end up using 3 or 4. And I'm just going to use instruments for today. Once we click on the track, our active track has some features down here. Our default is a grand piano, and I'm not going to use that one. I want a harp. So I'm going to find that here in the string section. And once I have selected that, I'm going to name this track Harp, just for my own reference. That's not going to affect the sound of it. I did that with a double click. Let's go down here to the bottom left corner and choose MIDI editor. And that's going to let us draw notes and whether or not we have a keyboard like I do. I won't use my keyboard today. I think the MIDI editor is a little bit small by default, so I'm going to make it take up more of the screen. And I'm zooming in, and I'm just doing that on my browser. You could zoom in up here on BandLab's interface, but this is going to be easier to see for the video, I think. The double click is going to bring a note in, and if we move the cursor to the edge, we can change the length of the note. It's going to try to snap to these grid lines. That's generally going to be a good thing. It's going to keep our notes in time. The next note you'll see comes in at the same length as the previous note. So if I make this one short, the next one's going to be short like that. I'm going to start with a few long notes though. And then spacebar is going to play that. And that sounds nice and all, but I want a little bit more before my pattern repeats. So I'm going to drag this edge out. I'm going from the bottom right corner because the top right corner is going to create a loop where it's going to repeat the notes. Control Z or Command Z is going to undo, just like most other programs. And you'll see that that changes the highlighted region down here in our MIDI editor. I'm going to add a few more notes here. And feel free to pause the video and look at which notes I'm playing if you want to follow along exactly. If you are here to write music, I assume you'll want to pick your own notes. I'm starting here on this D right above C4. As often as you need to, come back and listen to your notes. At this point, we're going to use a different note value. And let's hear what that sounds like before moving on. All right, and this last one is going to be twice the note length. Once we have our sequence in here, let's listen back to it and make sure we like it. I think it sounds pretty good. If we want that to continue, we're going to find this looping cursor and extend it as long as we want. I like to make a point of stopping at the end of one of these loops until I'm done with the song. This is a really helpful tool for beginners, especially to make sure you are creating a song that sounds relatively normal. And eventually we want to get to a point where we can make abnormal sounding stuff, but when we're learning, it's good to do stuff that's basic. Once we're happy with the notes, we can add our own effects or processing down here in the effects section. So let's click there and then click add effect. We have a ton of options here, but for my Dungeon Synth track, I think I want to add reverb. So I'm going to choose Space Maker. I'm going to change from basic to church and adjust wet/dry. Wet is the term we use to describe how much of the effect we are applying to the track. I recommend pulling this up and down while the track is playing so you can hear in real time what the change sounds like. And you'll notice as you turn this up that it's going to get a little bit distorted. And that's because our track is overloading a bit. So over here on volume, we're going to turn this down. I'm going to turn it down to around -6. I think -6 is a good starting point, and in my other workstations, I use that as my default for new tracks. Let's hear what these other controls do. So I ended up with room size 8.7, spread 7.9, and 47% wet dry. And these are things that you'll want to do to taste. Different songs require different amounts, and you'll never know exactly how much you want until you hear it. For now, we're going to be done with the harp track and move on. Once we click on instrument 2, we're going to have to move back to the instrument section to choose what our sound is going to be. Again, we'll choose from the instrument menu, and this time, I think we're going to use a choir. Let's see what that sounds like. We can always audition the sound by clicking over here. Or if you have a MIDI device connected, as I do, we can use our keyboard to control that. I'm not going to use my keyboard for this tutorial series, because if you're a beginner, I assume you don't have one yet. And if you do, you probably know how to use it. Again, for our own reference, we're going to name the track. This one will be called Choir. And if we're writing a song, we want to make sure the notes that we choose for the choir sound nice with the notes we use for the harp. To do this, it's going to require a little bit of composition skill, and this tutorial series isn't going to go into that. I have some other videos on composing, and it's a very delicate subject, and there's lots of rules that you can learn to follow or break, and there's a lot of different mindsets. So I recommend following a ton of different creators or listening to music that you like and trying to identify how those creators choose the notes that they choose. For me, I want to look at what I put into the harp track, and I want to choose the same starting note for my choir. So I'm choosing this D right above C4. And for a choir sound, it's going to sound nice if that sound sustains for a long time. So just as a starting point, we're going to hear what that choir sounds like if I hold the note out for the first measure. And I think that sounds pretty good, but the choir is quite loud, and I want it to sit behind the harp. So because the harp is at -6, the choir will go to -9. I like to work in groups of 3 decibels at a time. I'm having trouble getting there, so we'll do -9.3. And I think that sounds pretty good. So this isn't enough notes for me. I want the notes to change periodically. About halfway through the harp part, we're going to change to a new note. And hear what that sounds like. And because of the nature of this slow moving part, I think that this loop needs to last longer than this loop. So we're going to make the choir part twice as long as the harp part. And I'm going to choose these notes. It's a B flat and an F. And now we're going to loop this part out to the length of the rest of the song. In order to stay true to the ambiance we created with the harp, I want to add a reverb to the harp track as well. But before I do that, I'm going to add a delay. And delay is just an echo, and it's going to give us more of a sense of space. And the reason I'm choosing to do this is because this choir sound has a slow attack, which means that it takes a long time to get to full volume. So I want this to bleed over and have sort of a natural bleed over, like it's echoing in a big room. So we're going to choose D delay, which probably stands for digital delay first. And after that, we're going to choose Space Maker again. And I want that church sound again. And I want the choir to sound further away, so I'm going to make the room size a little bit bigger. Let's pull up to 9.5, 9.6, and I'm going to pull the wet dry up pretty far so that it sounds like it's further away. Let's hear what that sounds like. And as you can hear, it's repeating here at bar 9. And I think that sounds pretty good so far, but I'd like to fill in the low frequency range some more. So what we're going to do is add a bass instrument here. So I'll rename this bass and change it from a piano to some kind of a bass instrument. I think I want to use a synth bass, and I'll choose Moog bass just because I like my Moogs. I've got one over here, and we'll see what it sounds like. It's pretty beefy, so we might need to do some more processing to make it fit in, but let's give it a shot and go to our MIDI editor. For a bass, I want to start on a lower note, so because I started on a D4 before, we're going to start on a D2, or maybe a D1. Let's hear what that sounds like. Again, pretty distorted. Let's turn the volume down. This will be the quietest instrument, and we'll go down to -12 or so. I think it sounds pretty good, but maybe it shouldn't start right at the beginning. So we'll drag it over here, extend the part out. And for now, we're just going to track the notes that we used in the previous section. And notice that this isn't sounding, which means it's too low for this sample. So we'll pull it up to the B flat and octave up. And now we're going down to this F. So let's hear what that sounds like once the bass comes in. I think it sounds pretty good, but these first two notes are really low, so I think what we're going to do is bring them up 1 octave and see what that sounds like as a point of comparison. I like that, but the sound's still extreme, so we're going to go down to our effects, and we're going to choose to add some kind of a filter. Filters are tone shaping effects, so we're finding that in the tone category. We'll choose multi-filter, and we want low pass. Low pass allows low frequencies to come through, and it removes high frequencies. So let's hear what this sounds like if we adjust it while the song plays back. pulled it back pretty far to around 650 hertz. And I think it sounds a lot better. Let's make that part repeat again on all the instruments. And then let's have the harp play by itself for a little bit and see what that feels like. Alright, I think that sounds pretty good as a starting point, and at this point in the song, I'm starting to feel like we'd benefit from adding a fourth instrument. So we'll take a look at that next time. Thanks for coming by.